The 20-Minute Call is brought to you by SSK Industries, home of Cyprus, USA. Welcome to the 20-Minute Call, the podcast about the dreamers, boundary pushers, rebels, and champions of the skydiving industry. Each episode is a narrative journey highlighted by the highs, lows, and luck that the skydiving industry delivers, as told by the most influential people within the sport. If you've ever dreamed of becoming a skydiver, perhaps opening a drop zone, or becoming the next world champion, you'll enjoy the 20-Minute Call, hosted by me, James LeBarry. My guest today is a man whose camera helped define some of the most unforgettable images our sport has ever seen. Joe Jennings is a pioneering aerial cinematographer whose work has inspired generations of skydivers and reached millions of people around the world. But before Hollywood came calling, Joe was already making history. Alongside Rob Harris, one of the most gifted and electrifying athletes the sport has ever known, Joe became part of one of the most iconic partnerships during the era of sky surfing. Together, they pushed the boundaries of what people believed was possible in freefall, winning gold at 2 world championships and capturing victory at the 1995 Extreme Games against the best in the world. Joe would go on to help showcase the creativity, fun, and pure possibility of skydiving through Good Stuff, a film that became legendary drop zones around the globe. For many jumpers, it was more than a video on the shelf. It was inspiration. It was proof that imagination in the sky had no limits. As an aerial cinematographer and stunt coordinator, Joe became sought after by major brands and filmmakers alike, working on more than 40 television commercials and bringing unforgettable ideas to life in the air. Among the most recognized was Pepsi's Goose commercial, the first ad to air during the 1998 Super Bowl, which went on to be recognized as the top-rated Super Bowl commercial of the year, winning a Clio Award. His work would also appear in major motion pictures, including Charlie's Angels, Triple X, San Andreas, and 2015's Point Break. This year, Joe's life and career are being featured in the film Space Cowboy, a documentary that has been earning strong praise from audiences both inside and outside the skydiving community. More than a story about achievement, it is also a deeply human portrait of risk, loss, resilience, and purpose. For those in our sport, it is essential viewing and a powerful reminder that behind extraordinary accomplishment is often an equally extraordinary personal journey. Across a remarkable career, Joe's list of accolades include a total of 4 world championships, 2 Emmy Awards, and USPA's Gold Medal for Meritorious Service. It is my great pleasure to welcome Joe Jennings to the 20-Minute Call podcast. Hi, Joe.
James, hello. Thanks for having me on.
Joe, it's really my pleasure. Gosh, where do we even begin here? I think I'll dive right in if you're good with it.
No, that's great. I'll follow your lead.
Okay. So, Joe, I'd like to begin with a sentence on your website that really stood out to me. You wrote, "Flying camera, I've won 4 world championship titles and dozens of awards, including 2 Emmys, only to look in the mirror and realize that I'm still just me." Can you tell me about that? What compelled you to write that?
You know, it's interesting. I don't really know how that would contribute to marketing myself as a skydiving videographer, but I put it in there nevertheless, because I did realize that some of the things that I had dedicated my life to, the training to win skydiving competitions and the journey to make things and the projects. And it's interesting. And I remember talking with Dan BC about this. He felt kind of the same way. He was talking about how training to win was really important for his growth as a human being, had a big effect on his life. Winning itself was a lot of fun, but you do realize that, when you win a competition, you have that elation that you feel for a short period of time, and then there's some celebration, but you kind of settle back into being yourself again. You just kind of look in the mirror and go, wow, it's still just me, And in some ways I mean, at this point in my life, I'm kind of grateful for that because, I kind of like just being a human being.
Was there ever a time where you, due to your accomplishments, ever had an inflated ego? Because you seem like a really humble guy.
I don't know. I think that, I was driven by ego as much as anybody. I really wanted to identify as as a winner and as successful and all of that. So, yeah, ego plays into that. I think that I realized pretty quickly after accomplishing some of those things, I wasn't entirely comfortable with the new realities that I experienced. They were good, and I wouldn't trade them. The skydiving community as a subculture, there are just so many terrific people. But one of the things that happened after winning some world championships and then doing well at the X Games, well, actually winning the X Games with Rob, and then taking third at the X Games with Patrick de Gallardon, things really opened up for me. A lot of opportunities to do things that I wanted to do. So I wasn't entirely comfortable with, the notoriety. Somebody might recognize me and I don't recognize them, and I feel bad for not knowing names. I've been horrible with names. But it did allow me to do a lot of things otherwise I wouldn't have been allowed to do. People, drop zone owners and skydivers were like, if this is what you want to do, we're going to try to help you make it happen. So that was wonderful. On the other hand, sometimes people assume that you are better at everything than you are. They might assume that you're like a great canopy pilot, and maybe you're a great camera flyer, but that doesn't mean you're a great canopy pilot. It doesn't mean you're a great wingsuit flyer or a freestylist or any of that. But sometimes they'll assume, well, you can handle all these things. Come on and do it. And you have to learn to regulate yourself a little bit because some folks would assume that I could do things that I really couldn't safely do. So I learned that pretty quickly.
This is the first time we've met. I've been aware of you for a long time. And in my research, I'm trying to get a sense of who you are. On your website again, which is really showcasing all of your accomplishments, all of your achievements, but very organically, it seems that you have sprinkled in some things that I think maybe some folks would overlook. So the first detail we just talked about was you basically say, I'm still just me. But then there's a second note where you actually share on the site, and in one sentence, it could be overlooked, but another detail you reveal is that you were raised on a commune. And it's not something I expected, but it shows, in that paragraph that it's obviously a key part of your journey, your story. For those unfamiliar with your story, can you share the significance of that detail of being raised on a commune for a part of your childhood?
Sure. In fact, it's one of the things that I found out when you let producers and then, directors who are any good, they're going to dig things up. Living on a commune for a period of time wasn't really something I talked about until recently. When I was a kid, I had a really difficult time focusing in regular school. I'd be focused on all the wrong stuff. For example, the teacher would give us instructions and I would miss what those instructions were, but I could clearly hear all the pencils scratching away and kids doing something that I wasn't aware of. I just couldn't handle it. And so my mom in particular thought, well, I want them to be in school. There was a school, it was called School of the Arts up in Newton, New Jersey, which at the time was in the middle of nowhere. My folks shipped me off to School of the Arts. I ran around on a farm and found out pretty quickly that, School of the Arts was more like, just a commune where people sort of drifted in and out. And it wasn't a bad experience, actually. It was actually, I liked it. I ran around, I rode horses. I did a lot of work I wouldn't have otherwise learned how to do, but I don't recall ever sitting in a classroom and learning, anything academic there. And then it really turned into, when my parents eventually moved out to the country, because I think they just liked the whole situation. They were attracted to the area and they wanted to live out there. And so they bought a farm close to School of the Arts and actually started their own sort of a school/commune. And I remember taking a couple of classes there that lasted, I don't know, a few weeks maybe. That really blew up when my parents' relationship blew up. And so, we're on this commune. There are people who are coming and going, but my parents, when their relationship blew up, my dad went to New York, my mom went to California, and us kids now are out on this farm/commune for about 2 years. A lot of it I don't remember. My big sister, she was a young teenager at the time. She remembers a lot of it. And so she would tell us stories about things that we went through. Again, just a really unusual period of time in my life, just where it was like being out on a farm with people who came and went. I don't recall ever sitting down with adults for a meal or anything. You just kind of get along and do your own thing, and you dress yourself and do all of that. And when you're 7 years old, you don't do a very good job of it. You become, that kid in a place without parents. And back then, we're talking late 60s, early 70s, there was this kind of idyllic vision of what a home should be with a housewife and a husband and, all of these things in place. And a family that blew apart, was one to be avoided. Then it was kind of like you find yourself being more and more of a loner because the kids you used to hang around with are not hanging around with you anymore. Their parents aren't having it. But, my brother and my 3 sisters, we were all there. And I think we learned to support each other. And our relationships have been deep and good and loving ever since. I think we were looking out for each other. And that was a defining period in my life.
This episode is brought to you by SSK Industries, home of Cypress, USA. Since its release in 1991, the Cybernetic Parachute Release System, or Cypress, has been on more than 192 million skydives and has never failed to activate when called upon in the most critical moments. Engineered and built with German precision, the device has saved over 5,400 lives. Why choose anything else when your life might just depend on it? Cypress. It could be assumed that during a very defining point where growing up that way is different, probably didn't know it was any different, it was all you knew at the time, but maybe the outcome for some people who are disconnected from their parents, sort of growing up on a commune, might not turn out as well as you have, perhaps. Maybe that's a stereotype. But I'm curious to know how that experience affected you positively to allow you to rise in the way that you have. Like, what were the core ingredients of that experience that helped you be so successful? And we'll get into maybe some of the negative attributes for that maybe a little later, and unless you want to talk about them now.
You do learn to be self-motivated. I think that we're driven, we have ambition for different reasons. They're different motivators. For me, I was athletic. I was smart. I didn't know it because academically I wasn't. So academics were really difficult for me. And you feel kind of dumb as a kid, when you go through that. But, I had a lot of energy. I used to walk around on my hands, go up and down stairs on my hands, ride a little unicycle, I could out arm wrestle most, I was in middle school and I could arm wrestle most of the high schoolers and win. I was a very strong little kid. So, there were positives, right? There were positives. Actually, no, I was in middle school after that experience out on the farm. But, I think also baked in to some of the, just being brought up as sort of an outcast is you feel very motivated once you start to find something that you're into and you're good at. You feel motivated because you just think, if I can accomplish this and I can become an accomplished camera flyer in my case, it motivates you to train because it's like, then I'll be somebody. Then I'll be worth hanging out with or whatever the case. So sometimes we're motivated by our own insecurities. We push hard. Some people, I think a lot of people, me included, push hard because we think like, if I accomplish this, I'm worth, I suppose, more respect, etc. A number of reasons, for sure.
Let's talk about skydiving. What was the circumstance that led you to making your first jump?
Oh, that was Sissy, my wife. We were dating back in college, and she said to me, "You want to go skydiving?" It was her idea, just straight out of the blue. Let's go. And of course, I was like, "Sure, let's do it." So off we went, and she had a lot of fun. It was great for her, but it wasn't, and it scared me. I mean, I was really terrified. I remember being up in this Cessna, and the instructor's name was Mad John, who you might have heard of. He's a real character. At the time, he had a big beard. He was having lunch on the way up to 3,000 feet where they were going to drop us in static lines. So you train all day, to put your left hand out on the strut and then put your left foot out and then put your right hand out and then your right foot, and you climb out on the strut, go off and then have the static line open. And I remember Sissy was just so into it and so happy. What I remember first is the door comes open and, there's wind in the cabin. That was my first experience of wind inside of an airplane. And in a Cessna, it's a little stronger than it is like in a Caravan or a Skyvan or anything else. You know what I mean? And so the wind is whooshing around, and Mad John has crumbs in his beard, and they're starting to fly around the cabin. And I visually remember him, barking instructions at Sissy to, "Are you ready to do this?" and climb out and go. And she's got a smile on her face, and she's just climbing out and doing her thing. And he's yelling instructions, and I watched her go, and I heard her drop away. And that sound, like when somebody's hitting the wind, you hear that, like the wind kind of, whenever people leave an airplane, we get used to it. But I remember I heard that, and it was like a jump scare. You know what I mean? It was like, oh my God. And then the static line opens and it bangs on the side of the plane, and Mad John pulls it, and he's starting to bark instructions at me. And I went ahead and did it. And, what I realized is that a lot of times when we do something we're really afraid of, we are reduced to our training. And I remember him barking instructions at me, and, I had put my left arm out, grabbed the strut, put my, right foot out and right hand. And, I don't remember the sequence exactly, but I had trained so many times that I just found myself doing it. And then he said to go, and I went. And you're supposed to count, right? 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3. I didn't count. I mean, I left the step, and I was just like, oh my God, and then the parachute opens up, and that was it. That was it. I mean, I knew at that moment that, yeah, I was going to be skydiving.
You were electrified.
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. Especially for somebody, and this is true for a lot of skydivers. It's like those of us who have ADD and other things, which is more common than people think. You're looking for that feeling, and it can get you into trouble. In my teens, I was a troublemaker. I was looking for something. And with skydiving, I was like, all right, I found it.
Do you remember your first camera jump?
Yeah, first camera jump. I was already really into, recording skydives. I would take a tape recorder and strap it to my wrist and scream into it so I could relive the jump, and then I'd play it for people. So it was like, I was early on just really interested in capturing the feeling of jumping. So I think, flying camera was kind of almost like a natural progression for me. I think when I had about 50 jumps, I met a guy who was flying camera named Roland Barksdale, who was one of the kind of hotshot camera flyers in Southern California. He was a really nice guy, and I expressed my interest in flying camera. He was just kind of enthusiastic and cool. I kind of lucked out because I do remember speaking with a couple other camera flyers. I don't even remember their names, but I would, ask them about it. And it was like, I'm not even going to talk to you. These are trade secrets, and I got no reason to talk to you anyway, et cetera, et cetera. But Roland was like, I don't know. I think he sensed my enthusiasm, and he walked me through it, set me up with a little helmet camera. And I think I had 50 or 60 jumps, and I was, following people doing RW out of airplanes. That many jumps with a camcorder on my head. But I loved it. Oh my God. My first jump, and I filmed this 4-way, and I look back on it. It's not horrible. I mean, they're in frame. You know what I mean? Man, I watched that jump 30 or 40 times easily after that. It was the best thing ever for me because it was like, wow, I get to relive this and I get to see what I did. And that was it. It was like, yeah, I was a camera flyer early on.
I remember reading an article, or I recall reading an article where Tom Sanders and Norm Kent were on the same drop zone as you, and you were being a little bit starstruck. Can you share that story of meeting those guys?
Yeah, so I had been flying camera for a little while. I couldn't talk to any of those guys. So, I mean, and that was part of my nature, right? I mean, the cooler somebody was and the more I wanted to know them and be friends with them, the more I was afraid of them and wouldn't even go near them. And guys like Norman Kent and Tom Sanders, another guy named Wally Gubbins, they come walking through Paris Valley. And to me, they were just like gods. And I could not bring myself to talk to them. I would just act like this guy who didn't care. They were walking by. To this day, remember the visual of them walking by because it was that, to me, it was that cool. It's almost like, a moment they forgot immediately and I'll remember for the rest of my life. I had the same experience when I filmed George Bush Sr. skydiving. We were setting up and I guess he had to use a bathroom. So his security team comes into the hangar and Secret Service, and they kind of spread out, look around real quick. Kind of casual, but professional. Everything's cool. And in he comes, shook our hands on the way in. And I realized this is a moment I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. And it's a moment he's going to forget in the bathroom. It was the same way with Norman Kent and Tom Sanders. Star Trek struck, couldn't say a word to him.
What just keyed that thought with George Bush is Craig Girard has been on this program and he recounted meeting George Bush and how George Bush really made Craig Girard feel quite special to say that he was in the presence of a president of the United States. Did you find that? It sounds like he wasn't a very superficial guy. He really, when he engaged with you, he was completely present. Did you experience that too?
I did. I mean, he was really friendly and charismatic. I didn't vote for him, and so I was surprised that I was like, well, okay, they obviously didn't check for that in my background. He was charming. I mean, he was a really nice guy. And Barbara Bush was there too. And she's like the grandma everybody wants, just really sweet. And he came in and did the training, and he used to fly, I guess, fighter planes, right? So he was a pilot. So he's going through the training in the facility at Yuma, and I got to see some of that. He was like a machine, just taking instructions seriously. He was respectful to the instructors, everybody around him. He was really nice to us. It's pretty remarkable. I mean, politicians, I guess, they get good at that sort of thing. But you naturally, I really liked him. And then after the skydive, Tom Sanders and I got to go into a room with George Bush and Barbara Bush, and they sat down and we showed our videos and they commented on them, and that was remarkable. You get to spend a little time with them. Yeah, I won't forget that.
What a cool story.
Yeah. I will say this, though. We're in Yuma. Out comes George Bush. He performs his jump, pulls his parachute. Everything is good. Bumps his head on the way out the door because he's just such a tall guy. That's another thing about him, is like you're looking up at him as he shakes your hand. Before we even landed, the wind whipped up out of nowhere like a dust storm, that kind of thing. And he's still way up in the air. And they got to talk him down on the radio. And of course, they have the radios and everything set up good, and he's following instructions good. And I'm sure he's aware, like, I'm headed upwind, but I'm moving downwind. I mean, as a pilot, I'm sure like he kind of knew what was happening. But, they steered him over the top of the drop zone, and then he backed up to where he was going to land. And he landed, and there were like 12 guys on him, sort of a tackle / hold him up deal, and then collapsing his parachute. Whew, yeah.
Not the AFF student that you want to have a hard landing with.
No.
The 20-Minute Call is supported by Freefall Films, the new AI video editing software that's taking the drop zone industry by storm. Savvy DZOs are switching to Freefall Films because it's easy to use and built with features to help you, the hardworking DZO, make more money. The best thing about Freefall Films is it's driven by passionate people who love skydiving and seeing their customers thrive. Get a free demo and mention the 20-Minute Call to receive a credit of $200. Freefall Films, simpler, more powerful, more profitable. Joe, I'd like to talk about Space Cowboy. I've seen it, and it is an extraordinary movie. And I came away from it. It resonated with me in multiple different ways. For anyone listening, I cannot encourage you enough to see this film. It is about skydiving, but it is about so much more than skydiving. And what I really appreciated about it was we see in your element, but also your humanity, your challenges as you share openly with depression and grief, the highs and lows of your life. I'm curious, were you apprehensive of putting your life on screen in front of the world? That's a vulnerable position to be in.
I was. I will say in hindsight, I'm glad that I did. I think that Maura Strauch, who directed also Sunshine Superman, a movie about Carl Banish, great documentary, and Bryce Leavitt were both directors. I think that they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing. But I will say that, like, if anybody approaches you about doing your life story, get ready, because if they're any good, they're going to dig. And then you'll find things that you hadn't thought about or that you generally don't share. I managed to get along and do my thing without ever sharing that I grapple with depression. In fact, I didn't even know that I was really grappling with depression until, after losing Rob and after losing Patrick, when kind of out of nowhere, it broadsided me, and it became kind of terrifying, like, oh my God, this is a nightmare. This is horrible. But I'm sorry, I'm going off. Like, to answer your question, yeah, it was a process. Our first interviews were, just talking about skydiving and my life. And then I think they took notes and said, look, we want to dig a little deeper here. We want to go a little deeper there. I remember telling them that, okay, this isn't a sad story. And I just, by then it really comes down to, do you trust the people who are making the movie? Are they going to sensationalize things and make good guys and bad guys? What are they going to do with this? But I had known Bryce Leavitt as a very, very curious and just open and honest person. And Maura, she's just sort of a master storyteller. I eventually just decided to trust them. So what I would do before I'd sit down for an interview is I would meditate for about a half hour, 40 minutes, whatever it took. They'd be setting up. My interviews were in the garage. So that's on the opposite side of the house. So I would come into our bedroom, just sit quietly and just breathe and meditate a little bit. And it was like, once I decided, all right, I'm going to trust these guys and just talk about this stuff. They ask a question, I'm just going to answer it straight up. It was like I was meditating on getting out of my own way. Just let it out and trust them that they're going to tell a story that works. So that was a leap for me. Again, those aren't things that I really intended or planned to talk about.
Was it therapeutic?
In the long run, I think I really do think it's been, it's been a gift in that way. I think it's been really healing. It came out in festivals in late 24. It opened at TIFF, and that was a big deal. And it got into all kinds of festivals, and we were zooming around with it. And then and I don't understand production and why they do things, but they shelved it for a period of time. I think they wanted a theatrical release like what they have now. And they felt like, it'll keep. So they, in the timing, at the time, they, didn't put it out after the festivals. But what I'm getting at is, I think, talking about these things, I think it's huge. I spoke with some of these things at the same time with my therapist, just so I had a little clarity, so I could just describe some of these things as best as possible. But then watching this movie at the film festivals was not pleasant. I would sit down, and I think we're all our own worst critics, right? So I have to get past the fact that this is a movie about me and my close family and friends and all that, so which is good. And then to relive some of these things that I had spent most of my life trying to forget, to relive, what I went through as a kid, which, I couldn't drum up much of it other than knowing what had happened. I had some recollections, but couldn't say much about it. But just going back there again and again was kind of difficult. And then seeing it on the screen, it was just kind of hard to sit through it, and then the stories about losing Rob and Patrick and how that affected me. I mean, it just kind of got to the point where I would just step out of the theater like, I'm good. I've seen this. I'm good. But last week I went to a premiere and I sat in the back of the theater, and I was going to just watch the beginning of it and step out until the end, come back for Q&A, question and answer. I sat there and I just felt like an audience member. I just got caught up in the story, and I was able to just kind of sit there and watch it. And it's like, I actually liked it. Like, I actually enjoyed it. I told my wife, I was like, this is crazy. But I sat through the whole thing and I got to see it like an audience member, I think. And I dug it, And so, yeah, I mean, in the big picture, it's been a huge gift to me, I think, yeah.
When preparing for this interview and having seen the movie, I'm sensitive because suddenly I know a lot more about you than maybe if you and I met at a drop zone or anywhere, I would never know those things. And I'm a complete stranger, and I have so much context about you none of me, and wanting to be sensitive that I'm a stranger who has been given this gift, if you will, by you to put yourself out there. But at the same time, wanting to be sensitive that I'm a total stranger that has learned so much. But I will say that my takeaway from the movie, and I need to give some context for those that haven't seen it yet, is my appreciation for your life's arc, but also for the real life stuff that we all more or less go through in one way or another. To give context without giving too much away, is we're seeing your story arc as a person in skydiving, but also within your family, starting out with a commune and throughout, but then really getting down into how the loss of Rob affected you, and of course Patrick, it was just so personal. There was a couple of takeaways that I wanted to share with you, Joe, was when you all won the Extreme Games, I think it was that particular event, and you had this terrible imposter syndrome. Everyone's celebrating, you've done it. And, you feel like you're being performative. Like, yeah, everything's great, but your internal voice is, I'm not comfortable. That really struck me. And maybe because it resonated with me because I've always been a bit of a late bloomer. I think maybe those around me in my circle believe in me more than I believe in myself, and have had to deal with my own levels of imposter syndrome. And then the other part was your openness about depression and anxiety, because last year I started dealing with anxiety. I had to figure it out. And for me, that was, okay, how does the brain work? And when you actually said that in the movie, I was like, whoa, that's kind of what I was thinking is, I'm not accustomed to sort of feeling this way, but why is this happening? And what can I do to change my habits to keep this anxiety levels down? And that was a really interesting journey for me. What I was hungry for from the movie that didn't get revealed is, how were you able to manage your anxiety and your depression, if you are comfortable sharing that?
Yeah, sure. I'll say a couple of things. I mean, again, it was like when they interviewed me about these things, I kept reminding them, like, guys, this isn't a sad story. So just please don't go sappy on this, because it just was, but it's not this sad thing. Like, I wouldn't trade my life with anybody's. You know what I mean? So I'm where I want to be. So this isn't a sad story. Another thing that I appreciate about it is that, I'm realizing as we went around to the film festivals and some of the theaters we're going to now, is that I notice that so many folks in the audience can relate to loss and suffering and sadness and depression and anxiety, and all that. There's not a lot of people who can relate to skydiving, right? Let's face it. I mean, so the skydiving, I think that's my world, and the producers brought my world into this thing, and that's beautiful. But I think that a lot of folks during the Q&A would say, "Hey, man, me too." You know what I mean? It's interesting. It's almost like, coming out of the closet in a way. It's empowering in a way, because, okay, it's something that I kept hidden, because just naturally you do. You don't walk around at the drop zone or at your job or whatever going, I'm dealing with, such and such. You just maintain as best as you can, and you do your thing, right? Coming out with it and then seeing how many people, like, here you are saying, yeah, look, I kind of grapple with some of the same stuff. It's like, wow, that is kind of empowering. That said, what worked for me is anecdotal. I will say this. I think the thing that really put me on the journey to healing was surrendering to the fact that I've got this and it's a problem. It's not good. And saying, all right, I need help. I'm going to go to a therapist, and I'm going to speak to a therapist. I'm going to learn as much as I can about this. If I need to take drugs, I'm going to take drugs. I was resistant to that for a while. And I will say, my first experiences with therapists, I'd walk out of their offices thinking, like, these guys are crazier than I am. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, who are these people? I mean, just, some would be just so like, what's the word? Like, I don't know, just institutionalized, just taking notes and no response. And I'd be talking about all this stuff and I'm feeling depressed and horrible. And they'd be, well, now that you got that out, how does that make you feel? And I'd be just like, I feel absolutely nothing. And this is doing nothing for me. And I'm out, It took a while to meet somebody who I liked and trusted, and was a person who also, when I talked about some of my life experiences, I was curious about his, like, what brought you to psychology, and why are you here, and what have you been through? And he was straight up, he said, yeah. He said, what you went through with abandonment is like no small thing. And some of the issues you have are no small thing. But when I asked him about his experience, he talked about how he had to walk on eggshells almost his entire life around his dad, and his dad would just beat him up. So that wasn't my life. So I have no idea. I can't relate to that. I can't imagine. Like, I'll take my experience over that any day. You know what I mean? At some point, as far as the meds go, I was really resistant to doing them. It's like, I don't want to be dependent on some substance. I mean, I was just in anguish over it, really. But the more I researched it, right? I think when we're suffering, we become like Google doctors in a way, right? And we're just searching for anything and everything. And what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And I remember reading about how, and to this day, the science continues to say the same thing, is that for somebody with depression, the medicines that are available, the SSRIs, the antidepressants like Zoloft and Prozac and whatnot, they can be really helpful, and they can also be neuroprotective. I read studies where they made rats depressed, and that sucks, but I don't even know how they did it, but they made rats depressed. And some rats were treated with a antidepressant, and the other rats weren't. And then they measured a bunch of their brains after, a certain period of time. And the rats that were untreated and just allowed to just stayed depressed, right? The rats that were treated were going through the mazes again, and the rats that were depressed weren't. And their brains were physically smaller at the end of the test. And that's because when your neurons aren't firing, your brain responds to that. And it's like almost any part of our body can atrophy, literally atrophy, because the brain metabolism, the things aren't firing. Man, I'll tell you, from that point on, I was like, to heck with it. Sign me up. I will, I'll do it. Like, I'm not going to suffer just because I don't want to take this stuff. I just said, I'm going to try different things until I find something that works.
This episode is sponsored by SSK Industries, home of Cypress, USA. Since 1983, SSK has served the parachuting industry, and today they focus on Cypress sales, service, and support in the United States. Learn more at sskinc.com. The movie was by no means ever felt even sad or a tragedy to me. It just felt it had so much resonance and meaning to me because it was so relatable in multiple different facets. And I just thought it took courage. I've said this many times on this program. To be vulnerable is courageous. That's how I took it. My feeling of you, Joe, after watching this movie was I was inspired, and I wasn't inspired by the achievement. Like, you got to the pinnacle that if you're a camera flyer, you could only dream about getting. That's not the part. It was your humanity. And it was refreshing because everything in society, everything we tend to see is just so purely polished. And it was just so purely honest. And I came away from it with this great admiration for you, again, not because of what you've achieved, but by what you're willing to share. Because that movie, I think, is going to help. And even this conversation is going to help a lot of people that are maybe suffering silently.
And that's how most people suffer, right? I mean, that is really, that is the case for a lot of folks. But, it's almost like what I was telling my son. It's like you can still have an incredible life. When you're in it, it all feels bleak. Like, why bother? Like, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. And if somebody, knew, like, this is it, this is where I'm going to be for the rest of my life, it will never change. How do you blame somebody if they say, look, I'm out. This isn't working for me. I'm just going to suffer for the rest of my days. But for the vast majority of us, first of all, the science is getting better, and the condition by itself, it comes and goes, and it does get better. I think what I would encourage people to do is just be proactive, fish around, get a good therapist that you like talking to, and just go on a mission. Take it like that because, man, I mean, it's like you can roll on and just live an incredible life. And it's interesting, like you said, being with Rob Harris and going to the X Games and, having achieved what we had obsessed over for years of training, and then finding out I still felt like shit, was an eye-opener, a big eye-opener for me. The things that we broadcast about ourselves, I think, on Instagram or Facebook or, those kind of things, whether it's wealth or achievement or whatever else, boy, you can have that stuff and still feel pretty horrible. That's been an eye-opener for me. So again, I'd say anybody, if you're rich or poor or whatever, still, just attack it, go for it, because it's not good for you to have it. It's just not. It's not good for your brain, and it's certainly not good for your life. So get a good therapist and get on that journey.
I'm so grateful for your willingness to talk about this on a skydiving podcast. But
I know.
Most of these podcasts that we talk about, though, it's less about skydiving than really the human experience. I wanted to talk about it because I think that our audience of skydivers, we're all kind of going through things, and what your story brings is hope. Again, not a tragedy or a sad story. It's so hopeful. I want to switch gears real quick, Joe. Something else that struck me about watching the movie was watching you and Rob fly together when you had another camera flyer capturing you both. The skill set of the flying pre-wind tunnel blew my mind away. To see Rob doing what he was doing, and I've gone back and I've looked at a lot of the X Game videos. Like, I don't feel like really anyone was quite in the same league in terms of the level of skill with sky surfing. But then seeing your flying skills, wearing your camera suit with wings, and going, wow. I mean, even just the fact that you're in such close proximity to Rob, without a lot of wind tunnel training, you'd really think that you'd be all over the sky. But it seems like, he's never getting, super close to you or falling away. So you guys are just so tight. But the skill set without a wind tunnel, it's hard for me to comprehend that level of skill without that tool. Can you comment about that?
Yeah. I mean, in reality, when you're performing a routine, at least back then, we were moving around the sky, but we were moving together. So it all kind of, moved together. But man, I mean, you look at the evolution of how people are flying today, with wind tunnels as a training tool. And now, the things people are doing with wingsuits and everything else. I mean, good Lord, the evolution of the sport is wild. But at the time, Rob Harris was, first of all, sky surfing was really beautiful in itself. It's just a very cool looking kind of Silver Surfer looking thing. And then I luck out, I meet and end up flying camera for a guy who's a natural at it. Just his body type and everything lent itself to being able to pull these maneuvers off. He also just happened to be a very, very driven person. I think he was, 12 years old doing marathons. When he took up breakdancing, in less than a year, he was breakdancing for, the closing ceremonies of the Olympics with, oh God, I forget the musician.
Lionel Richie.
There you go, Lionel Richie. I'm just very focused and very dedicated, and that became contagious. I wanted to be better. And I learned a lot from him, just the way that he could kind of get in the zone and then just go through all of the things that he was learning and doing. And it really kind of taught me to do the same thing. And that's why I would go up if I wanted to learn a move, like I think this would look really good if I was able to fly like this, but I don't want to go up and, run into him so he would bail out and go practice some of his moves. And then I would bail out and try my own moves whether it was, backflying or barrel rolls or whatever else I was going to perform. I would just practice it again and again and again. It just we ended up just having this great work ethic and a great chemistry. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's how we did it.
It was magic. I want to also comment that what I've seen over the years, I've seen a lot of footage of you and Rob and your performances on YouTube mostly, but I've never heard Rob's voice. I just knew him for his skill. And what I loved about this movie is he came alive to me, someone that never got to meet him, never had a conversation with him, but the legend that is and was Rob Harris, suddenly, he was so human on the big screen as well. It was awesome. And the magic you guys had, extraordinary.
I love how they told his story in the movie, just the way that they put together what we had. I thought they did an amazing job. Rob kind of came to life, so very, very cool. I think also Maura, as a storyteller, she had already told Sunshine Superman. So she had told a story about Carl Banish, who had passed, right? And told a really compelling story about him. I think they did a great job, and I feel great about how, Rob was portrayed, and Patrick, Patrick de Gardon, my God, he was
legend,
and for good reason.
Joe, as I mentioned in the intro, you've done major feature films, major commercials. Would you tell me a story or our audience a story of maybe the most challenging set you've been on for either a movie or a commercial, something that really tested you, but you feel real proud about? Or don't feel proud about, but just it was really hard.
I learned that in the creative world of filmmaking, you get all types. And some folks are just creative and friendly and wonderful to work with. And then sometimes you run into folks who are just impossible. So I do have some stories like that. One in particular, Patrick and I were up in the Arctic Circle for a project where a skier was going to ski off Mount Asgard and open a parachute. And it was for an LG television commercial. And so the producers came out from Korea. And in Korea, in the production world, the director is God. What the director says goes. The director makes a call and people scramble to make it happen. And so up we go, and we're performing all of this stuff pretty much up there in the middle of nowhere, not a tree for 1,000 miles. We had to bring a bunch of, fake Christmas trees, for a guy named Dave Barley had to ski through and come off. And then Patrick was going to be doing sky skiing to be the guy in the air. At one point, the director wanted us to go fly close to the cliff. And we had already done it. So we're going to fly under parachutes. Patrick, with the LG canopy and me following him and just go fly close to a cliff. Pretty straightforward, but it was a blustery day. Our answer naturally was, we're going to have to wait for conditions to change. So then the interpreter tells the director what's up, and then the director just starts yelling. He goes, "Why not?" And so we explain again. It's turbulent. Our parachutes can collapse. It's just not safe to do it right now. Again, why not? And he's banging on the table, And we went back and forth a few times like that. And then Patrick told the interpreter, and we're in this meeting, it's this big table, pictures all over the place, and the project. And Patrick just says, "Well, maybe just tell him why not, because I'd punch him in the nose." And I thought, oh my God, and we're sitting there, and the interpreter said, "I'm not telling him that." We're just like, okay, but we're not going to jump by the cliff. So we got out of it, and then ultimately we did it when conditions were good. But that was classic.
If you're a DZO or DZM listening to this podcast and you're not using Burble, I've got a question. Why not? If the reason is price, what's the cost of your time? Other booking and manifest softwares are a one-size-fits-all. Burble was built from the ground up by a DZO for DZOs to maximize efficiency. Now, isn't that nice? There's no software that compares. Choose Burble. In my research, I haven't seen any injuries from this 13,000 plus jump career through all these years. Any methodology of what you've been able to do to keep yourself unhurt and undamaged?
I mean, I try to stay within the parameters of my abilities as best as I can. When I'm filming skydivers who are like, let's say they're really good vertical flyers or they're really good wingsuit flyers or whatever, I let them know, like, I'm in your playground. So, and I learned this early in my career. It's like, if I'm going to come into what you're an expert at, I need you to kind of look out for me. That's been helpful. I'm also, to a fault, I'm really protective about the jumpers who I work with as a stunt coordinator. I don't want to live through what we went through with Rob. And so I can kind of become a pain in the butt if I feel uncomfortable about something somebody wants to do. I've also run into contracts that to me sounded like they had coercion clauses in them. Like, we're coming with a big production. We're going to spend all this money. So therefore, we need you to sign that if you don't perform the stunt you said you're going to perform, if your performer isn't going to do it, that we can get $100,000 back or whatever. And I'm like, look, this jumper is entirely capable of doing this stunt and wants to do it. But if he wakes up and says he has a headache that morning and does not want to jump, I'm not going to, no, we're not going to sign a contract that says, we're just not going to sign a coercion clause, that kind of thing, Boy, I remember one attorney was like yelling at me over there. Is this a deal breaker? Is this a deal breaker? I just remember going, yes, it's a deal breaker. Oh my God. We're not going to have a coercion clause in any of our projects. So I became really protective. I went off track though. Am I still answering the question you asked?
Yeah, I was curious about some of the challenging projects you've been in, and you just gave us some insight of maybe some of the things that you've come across. I mean, this is a world that me and most of my audience have no idea about. So it's fascinating, to know some of the things that you come across.
Yeah. Think about it. I mean, skydiving itself is its own subculture, right? So the things that we experience among skydivers, I mean, skydivers come from, all different backgrounds, all different places, but it's folks that are attracted to risk taking. That comes with some pretty cool and unique people. I remember telling the producers of this show, I was like, wait till you meet my team. You're going to see like 8 documentaries right in front of you. This group of people, I think so. Skydivers, I think, are pretty extraordinary. Production, in some ways, is similar. It's got its own culture. Man, some productions, you show up and you just feel like you just like walked into the emperor's palace, and there's, the director and lead producer, and then there's all these folks that are just obeying any little whim that comes out of them. And it's like this intense environment, I've also been on productions where they're very casual, very cool. The director will be like, show me what you're good at. Other directors they get so specific that you end up doing things that are just so basic and dumb, but they want to control everything. And you just want to tell them, just give us 1 or 2 jumps to like do what we know how to do. You'll be really happy, Yeah, you just don't know what you're going to run into. There are a lot of stories from that field, and you can get in trouble pretty quick. I mean, I'll tell you another story. I was on a production for a German show where the host was going to jump with a Navy SEAL with bailout oxygen from 25,000 feet.
In tandem.
Mm-hmm. And so we hop in a plane and we're on our way up to altitude. And I noticed that I'm not feeling any pressure, like I'm not pressure, but we have the little plastic cones on our face of the plastic hose. And usually I feel a little something on my nose or, under my lip, and I didn't feel anything. And I checked with the pilot and he looks over at the gauge and it's green. So I'm like, okay, it's green. So We keep going, and I check one more time, and it's all good. And so I'm just chilling out, sitting, chilling out. And all of a sudden, the show host goes into like a violent spasm. His body just spasms out, and then he's asleep. Boom, he's out. And so I smack the pilot on the shoulder, and I'm like, we're done. This guy's not good. Let's go down. And then I went back to check on this guy, and I'm looking over him and talking to the instructor, hey man, your guy is out, so on and so forth. And I look at the instructor, and he's out. He's asleep behind the host. And I look up at the front of the plane, and the show's cameraman is sitting there with the camera in his lap, asleep. And the pilot is not responding. And we're still climbing. And I remember, there was a sound of the airplane and everything, but I remember that how it felt like one of the most quiet moments in my life, like, oh my God. And then in my mind, I'm thinking, how close am I? So my first thought was open the door and get out. But then another part of my brain was like, I'll never, I just knew I'll never live with myself if I do that. You know what I mean? If they continue to fly on and get damaged or hurt or die, I rush up to the front of the plane, and I start just shaking the pilot around, shaking him, and it's not really doing anything. So I just start pushing on his elbows. And, I don't know how to fly a plane. Like, I don't know how to, I'd love to know how to land a plane, but I just don't. I don't know how to fly a plane. But I do know, push forward on the yoke, you're probably going to start going down, right? So I start shoving on his elbows, and he kind of goes along with it, and just sort of pushes forward. And next thing you know, the plane's going down. Everybody wakes up. Isn't that crazy? And we get on the ground, and the show host and the cameraman are laying on the ground. They've got these headaches. I guess it really affected them. They had these headaches. They both didn't know they had passed out. No, I didn't pass out. They didn't know because it was like a blink for them, but they were out for at least a few minutes, from when I saw them. The instructor, who was a Navy SEAL, he recognized it, and he asked me, how long was I out? And I was like, man, I think maybe a couple minutes. And the pilot was just like, holy shit, you know what I mean? And down we go. I mean,
and you don't think you were hypoxic?
I might have been close, but I was good enough to be concerned and go back and check on the guy, and then to look, to see the situation in the plane and to freak out and feel scared. So obviously I wasn't that hypoxic yet.
Joe, it almost sounds like a horror movie, like, wake up, and then you turn and you see the instructors passed out, like, oh, this is going south so fast.
Totally. So, that was a production that, we got through it, but holy smokes. And I've had other accidents. Oh, I remember your question. Like, why am I not all banged up? I mean, some of it's, just lucky. Some of it's lucky. I mean, just like, I'm coming in for a landing and I know like this is not going to be good, and I screw it up and I get up and wipe the dirt off, and it's like, well, I didn't break anything, lucky me. And so, throughout my entire career, I twisted my ankle in Chamonix, France, when I was filming with Patrick de Gallardon, but it wasn't enough to even stop me jumping that day. Right. So that's the extent of it, other than bruises and cuts and things that you get, with your parachutes opening and everything else. But then a few years ago, I'm helping a neighbor fix a hole on his roof, and I go charging up the ladder, and the ladder wasn't locked, and I come crashing down, and it knocks me out, and I'm rushed off to the hospital, full traction, everything else. Concussion. It's like standard middle-aged guy thing, right? After this career, then I run up a ladder and, end up in the hospital with a broken wrist and a concussion.
Those ground activities will get you. You're still jumping quite a bit, Joe, or are you still working?
Yeah. I'm still at it, and I love it. Yeah, I imagine I'll be doing it for a while longer. I still feel, strong. My reflexes are still good. Also, though, I want to be mindful that, I'm not getting younger. I'm 63 now. What I don't want to do is wait until I get some sort of injury, maybe in my back or my neck or something. And then I'm going to live out the rest of my years with an injury and pain. I'm kind of at a point in my career where I'm beginning to think of what are some other things. Like I don't want to stop skydiving. I just may not want to jump with the really heavy cameras.
Yeah,
so much. Cameras are getting lighter. So
I have to say, Norm Kent's 70, and
that guy is a machine. I mean, yeah, I want to be like him. I mean, I don't know how he does it. Tom Sanders too. He's jumping. I mean, both of them. They're both into it.
Tell me, if you're not skydiving, what hobbies or interests do you invest time in?
And I have to admit, I haven't been getting out as much as I used to, but both of my boys and I love to surf. So we used to travel and surf. And then we've got good surfing nearby where I live. We're in Southern California in the South Bay of Los Angeles. There's great surf spots here. And my son taught surfing, and I actually took over his school for a period of time because I had taught a lot of kids how to surf. Anyway, love surfing. I used to do triathlons back in the day, the medium length ones, like half Ironman type stuff. And I was good, man. I'd come in 16th or 17th in a big crowd. I was never great, but I was really into it. And so, I like to swim. I like to ride my bike. I don't run as much now because it's like, man, I'm just like, my knees and, things get tweaked. Yeah, those are things that I like doing. I will say I've actually been, going out and giving some talks recently. That's kind of a rush because, it's scary. It's almost similar to like starting skydiving again. It's a bit of a rush. It's like, man, you better be prepared, and you get up there, and I take any opportunity I can to go up and speak. I mean, I've literally gone up and had a panic attack, once. I remember doing that. And I had to leave and go out, and I walked around it was at the drop zone. I was going to be given like not a seminar, but sort of a class on camera techniques. And I drank a bunch of coffee before it. I just wasn't thinking, and I get in there and I became self-aware. When you're public speaking, if you hear yourself and you get into this feedback loop where you hear yourself and then you feel the cotton mouth and everything coming on, it's like, all right, guys, this is just not happening. I'm freaking out. So I went out and I found some dude. He's walking around the drop zone. He's smoking a cigarette. I was like, can I have one of those? I went out and just puffed this thing down, and I'm smacking myself in the head like, what's wrong with you, And then I just walked right back into that place, and I was like, all right, I freaked out, but let's go, and I got through it. But I've also had a lot of great experiences with it. And I kind of like the rush of it. So, I see myself doing some more of that.
I was saying, Dan BC is doing a lot more public speaking.
Yeah. And Dan's a natural, right? He's a good public speaker. I mean,
he is. And speaking of movies, I would just love for someone to pick up his story. I think that would be great on the big screen as well. And I have to say, I had to smile because, there's that old footage. I don't know if it was good stuff. I can't remember or what it was, but obviously, Dan is in, airspeed is on the jump, and, everyone lands, and there's this incredibly bloodied up Dan BC.
Oh God.
And that is, it almost looks like it was painted on him. I mean, just the way that blood covers his face. I thought, oh my gosh, that's just so wild.
It was like one of those little things that, you could drop paint onto something that's spinning and it spreads out, I think that's what happened with Dan. And it's funny, they portrayed him as the guy that got run over by the car. In reality, that was Olav Zipser, right? He was the guy who got run over by the car, and he wasn't hurt. He didn't, he bounced off his backpack. Dan was in one of my cars, and it flipped backwards, and the top of the windshield hit him right in the nose and split it open, and I believe broke it. He came out, tracked away. God knows how he felt, but the car flipped backwards, hit him right in the nose, and he flies away, tracks off. By the time he landed, there he is, just covered in blood. Oh my God. Then he goes to the hospital and they would not believe his explanation. They literally would not believe him. I think they even might have called the cops or something to like investigate what the hell happened. It's pretty cool. Yeah, you'll have to ask him one day if you interview him. Yeah.
Joe, final question. You've been very generous with your time. A question I'd like to ask folks is, tell me about a crossroads moment in your life. And what I mean by that is there's often a moment in our lives where we meet somebody and that meeting takes us down at maybe a path in our life that we would have never taken had we not met them. Or maybe we're presented with an offer and we say yes to it, or we say no to it. But it's likely that had you not met that person or said yes or no to whatever circumstance or offer that you had, maybe you don't have the career that you do, and you and I are not even speaking right now.
It's interesting to consider, what would I be doing? I mean, I was working on a degree in business management with a minor in Spanish. God knows, what I would have done or where I would have gone. That crossroad moment for me was just by chance bumping into Rob Harris. And of course, I didn't know it at the time. He was jumping freestyle, and I was really interested in finding out what it was like to chase a moving target, because I had filmed so much RW and tandems and things, and I got really good at parking myself where I needed to be and getting the shot. But I had heard about camera flyers talking about chasing around freestylists and what they had to do. I thought, man, I want to try that. So Rob's doing freestyle. I went up with him on a jump, and it was just, I felt kind of like a human jet, just chasing. And then he would, do a move and slip away from me. I had no idea why his body would slip one way or the other, but I would, chase him down again. I opened my parachute. I was out of breath. And again, it was like, oh man, I'm so hooked. And Rob and I did a couple more jumps, and we just kind of got along. And I think he saw me, how stoked I was, and he was getting into freestyle and wanted to compete intermediate. And I don't even think he was thinking about sky surfing at the time, but it was like, you want to maybe team up and do some training jumps? He was training up in Taft. We met at Paris Valley. He was training up at the drop zone in Taft. I said yes, and I went up there with him. And it's interesting, the owners of the Taft drop zone at the time, they owned the place in Northern California.
It was the Jones family.
The Jones family. I mean, and then when I went to Paris Valley, they were running that school, and I was packing parachutes for them. And then I end up going over to Taft, and now they're running Taft. And the thing is, the Joneses, Jeff and Sherry and Shelley and Marty, Bill, all of them they were just really supportive, I could not have been in a better place. And I think that, they were there to support skydivers, and especially people who were dedicated and training hard. The Joneses, especially Bill, saw our work ethic, and he decided he wanted to support it. And so before we were winning anything, he was, drop zones closed, we'd jump in his Cessna and he'd take us up. Bunch of jumps, just on him, on the house. Very, very cool. So yeah, there you go. That would be the crossroads for me. And that began the adventure that I'm on.
What an adventure it's been.
No doubt.
Joe, I can't even thank you enough for giving me the time, particularly being that there's a lot happening right now. I think you were at a premiere last night, maybe, or the night before.
Couple of nights, yeah.
But I imagine, there's a lot of folks wanting to talk to you right now with this movie that is so compelling. Is there any chance that we're going to see it come to movie theaters outside of California?
Yeah, in fact, I'm flying off tomorrow to New York. There's a premiere in New York at the IFC Center Theater. Then I'm going to New Jersey for another premiere, and then Philadelphia. And if you go to spacecowboymovie.com, I think I said that right. There's a schedule of where this company called Abramarama, they distribute documentary type films, art house type films, and they're rolling it out.
Awesome.
And I really hope, I hope it does well. I really do. Because I think it's a good movie. We're not trying to sell a junky movie. Like, I feel good about it, and I'd love to see it do well. And I hope they can find a way of showing that it's about more than just extreme sports. I think that'll probably fill some more seats. We'll see.
It's so much more than anyone will expect between sitting down at the start and then leaving roughly an hour and a half later. But, Joe, thank you. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And
awesome. I'm glad.
Well, it was so great. And when you're coming into an interview with someone with so much acclaim, both in the sport and, has a major movie out right now and being so well received at film festivals, and, you think, I know they're busy. I hope, I wonder how this is going to go. And you've been nothing but kind and humble and generous. And thank you.
I've enjoyed it. I have enjoyed it. I think we've been on for
an hour and a half.
I mean, it just kind of, it doesn't even feel like it. We just got going, and I hope that doesn't mess up your, format or whatever you do.
No, I never like to stop a good story.
Okay.
Let it play out. Right. It's awesome.
Yeah. But it was great. I mean, it was really, this was fun. It was good talking with you. Thanks for your questions. I appreciate it.
Such a pleasure. Many thanks to our title sponsor, SSK Industries, home of Cypress USA, for supporting the 20-Minute Call. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And if you want to support the show further, support the companies that support this podcast. Until next time, blue skies.